firstly you think, oh, maybe I'll get a gig, right? Like maybe I'll get a job out of this, right? And you go and you feel like such a schmuck, and it's the same thing like I was talking about with Edinburgh. What am I doing here? I'm on the other side of the world. I haven't met anyone. This is stupid. And then, in the example of Kids Screen, I get drunk with a bunch of randos on Miami Beach on the last night. We have an absolute blast. It's got nothing to do with work.
Yeah.
I go home. And then a year and a half later, one of them reaches out to me. It's like, the studio I own are doing this thing, and we'd like you to write the dialogue for it. It's like, so what seems like a failure short term can often, sometimes it's a matter of patience.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Today's guest, wow, I don't even know where to begin. I'm speechless. What a journey, what a career, and what a human. I've watched Scott over the years. He and his band Tripod have changed the landscape of musical comedy and have been pioneers in this space for many years. It was an absolute joy to do this. Scott is deep, funny, insightful. Having this chat was all around good vibes. I got a lot out of it. I'm excited for all of you to listen. Plus, it was lovely to do this in person. Okay, let's get into it. Scott Edgar can do it all. He's a comedian, musician, composer, illustrator, writer, and perhaps is best known as 1/3 of the beloved, iconic Australian comedy band Tripod, with whom he's won an ARIA. He's also a veteran writer, composer, and illustrator for video games, animation and kids publishing, working for clients such as Ubisoft, Wizards of the Coast, Penguin Random House, the Cartoon Network, and the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. For many years, Tripod have been regulars on the international live comedy and cabaret circuit, regulars on radio and television, and have also done songwriting for musicals, for screen and stage. In 20 plus years since they first appeared at the Melbourne live pub scene, the boys have delighted audiences from comedy clubs to symphonic concert halls and everything in between. They've also created numerous narrative musicals for the stage, as well as children's cartoons and global video game properties, picking up multiple awards, and through their constant work on television and radio, becoming a much-loved household name along the way. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about his Grammy nomination, the highs and lows of a creative career, Tripod and taking a break, creativity and collaboration, his other wonderful creative endeavours, Skit House, the Australian art industry, and change of view of success. Before we get into this epic chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out at 3:30 Melbourne, Australian time, with the full video of the podcast to be released the following day. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's get into it. Actually, we'll start with something that I think would be very fun for you.
Yeah.
You look very nervous. You don't need to be. I want to hear about the Grammys. You're at the Grammys recently. That was
the
awesome.
Grammys. Oh, my God. Look, the Grammys is an interesting sort of locus of the topic of this podcast, actually, because I was sort of framing it in my head. I'm thinking, how do I talk about failure? And let's start with the image of me driving DoorDash to make ends meet whilst being a Grammy nominee. This was the start of my year this year.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So that tells you a little bit about showbiz, doesn't it?
It definitely does.
The Grammys themselves was just an amazing, surreal experience. So basically the context is that Tripod worked ostensibly as lyricists, but kind of primarily also as songwriters on a video game that came out late last year, I think, called Stray Gods.
Yeah.
And the premise, and it was through our dear friend Austin Wintory who brought us in on it, who's a video game composer. And so that's why we were there, because the game was ambitious enough creatively in terms of the way it used music in an interactive way. So you could actually, it's theoretically it was a musical, but you could choose how the songs are going to go during the song.
Really? So it's like choose your own adventure?
Yeah, but musically, right? So we had to write songs that had this branching structure.
That's very cool.
The challenge being that they also needed to still work not only as songs with a dynamic journey, etc., but also as a musical overall, right? And tell a story that made any sense or had any kind of emotional kind of impact, Nice. So it was a really weird, challenging, interesting gig, and I didn't stay on. I helped set up the systems, and helped kind of get our fingers behind how we were going to attack it, and did a bunch of writing, but I wasn't there right to the end of the project. I had some other things going on in my life, professionally as well as personally, so I sort of kind of left, the project about halfway through. So the Grammys was an interesting one because I absolutely deserved to be there.
Yeah.
But it had, because I worked on the project a lot, but it did have certain kind of, I don't know, interpersonal political overtones.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Not that I wasn't absolutely welcomed by, for example, Austin, but it was not without its politics, because Tripod are on a big hiatus as well, right?
Oh, really?
So we haven't actually played together for quite a while. So, there was aspects of the Grammys that needed navigating. Not that there was any hostility or anything. It was really a good time, but it was not without its kind of odd, B stories, subtexts. And I don't know. That just sort of tells you that there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes at these kinds of things.
Exactly. People just see kind of the trophy, or you at the event, and you think it's all sunshine and rainbows.
That's right.
The journey there.
But the experience itself was incredible. It's a week of events, right?
Yeah.
There's various unions and musicians, kind of organisations and rights organisations and everything. They all throw their own parties, and they also take really good care of the nominees. They make a real fuss of you. You get a medal.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You get your photo taken. There's all these things.
Feel like a A-class celebrity?
Well, you don't feel like it. What's nice about it is you realise how many Grammy nominees are not A-class celebrities, if you know what I mean, right?
Yep.
So, you feel like this stranger in a strange land. What am I doing here? I'm on the other side of the world. I don't belong here. And then you realise that's how 95% of the other nominees also feel, which is a really reassuring thing. And it's always really good to remind yourself of that too, right? People are just people,
Yeah.
It was fantastic. I think my high point was the Lifetime Achievement Awards. It was a pretty small theatre. We got to be within, sort of touching distance of like NWA as they got their, Lifetime Achievement Award.
That's cool.
Gladys Knight was there. I mean, that was, it's just incredible kind of celebration of culture. It was really nice to be part of, but I also felt like I was on an anthropologically, expedition to another world that didn't really kind of have much bearing on my life. Do you know what I mean? It's,
Yeah, is it actually in like what regard?
Well, just in terms of like, there's, I'm really happy for America that they've got this vibrant, music industry to celebrate. But I live in Melbourne, which, don't get me wrong, amazing musicians, amazing music kind of world here, but I wouldn't exactly call it an industry or anything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because, then there was a lot of sort of narrative about like the Grammy nomination, that's going to change your life. But I'm like, well, it's not really. I mean, it's an obscure category for an obscure game on which I had an obscure role.
Yeah, I like that.
So I'm proud of the work I did on that game, and I'm certainly proud that it got nominated. But I don't have any illusions about that. Suddenly,
You don't have the paparazzi outside the house.
hobnobbing with, Rihanna or anything like that.
That's a really interesting perspective. Do you think you're able to, if you got this, let's say 20, 30 years ago, do you think you would see it the same way as you would now?
No, I don't. I mean, I think it would have been very different. Like, this has come, that nomination, as Gatesy from my band so beautifully kind of observed, is sort of the cherry on top of a long career, right?
Nice.
It's not a starting gun. It's not the beginning of something, in the same way that Red Faces was for us in the mid-90s. If we had something like this happens early in your career, that's a whole different ballgame. When you're young.
Is it more just the excitement? You're fresh. You can leverage it. Your career hasn't been as formed.
Well, also probably just in that hypothetical, if you're that young and achieve that level of recognition that quickly, you've got something special, haven't you? One would hope.
But you've also got something special.
Oh, good on you. I wasn't fishing.
No. I'm reading a piece of paper that says, say this when I say this. No, but I think it's really awesome that, all careers are different. You've been doing this for 30 plus years, and to still know at 30 plus years, even though, like, as you said, you put the award in perspective, it's still remarkable that you can achieve something like that, inverted commas, later in your career.
Yeah. I mean, sure, certainly, I do try and be kind of grateful about it. I'm absolutely, it is, I can see how it's a real honour, and it's a lovely, and I love telling the story, and I was really thrilled to be there and everything.
Nice.
But there's context. Like there's machinations which are why you get a nomination. It's not just a pure meritocracy. Like, for example, it's a new category, video game music.
Yep.
Austin, the composer of Stray Gods, is also very visible in that community, right? And is part of the conversations about even setting the category up in the first place, right?
Yep.
So he's already, I'm not saying there's corruption or
no,
conspiracy or anything.
More recognised in that.
Yeah, it's not necessarily this just total kind of blank, blind justice situation. There's context.
But you can't be bad.
No, yeah, true.
I fully agree.
You can't be bad.
But it's actually really interesting that it's new. I don't play many video games. When I used to play Nintendo 64, I think they had a Sympathy do one of the games, Zelda, Ocarina of Time. I don't know if you ever played.
I love Ocarina of Time.
And that, I listen to the soundtrack now, and I haven't played that game in years. Banjo-Kazooie was really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay, you're speaking my language.
Oh, I know.
It is amazing, I'm not a music expert, so I'm probably going to steer away from it. Like music can do so much for one's well-being in life. But even through a video game, who would have thought? It's actually amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Because so many video games is just like the one beat or two beats or whatever, and it's pretty boring. A good soundtrack elevates.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It's an incredible art form, and it's like all the things you need to know how to do to be good at sort of linear music, plus this whole another level of kind of logic and kind of problem solving around it being responsive to the player's actions and responsive, and change and be interactive and so forth, right? Which is a whole nother kind of technical bag of tricks.
It's very cool that you've been able to, I don't know if the right word's transition. You've been doing, your musical comedy and I think you've been doing covers and other stuff. And then that would also have a skill set for video games. Like there's no way you would have thought.
Strange, yeah. I mean, I've been so lucky in terms of being able to somehow leverage all my various passions and obsessions into at least a level of professional work that I can then sort of use them as tax write-offs.
I also, this just sprung to mind. I think we had a Tony Award winner.
Oh, wow.
And, you mentioned DoorDash, and then you're at the Grammys, which is a nice contrast to the industry. Every single person in this industry, has the highs and the lows. You just see the highs, you don't see the lows.
Totally, yeah.
But I could speak for like 50 guests that spring off the top of my head. But this one guest, she won a Tony Award, similar experience, they kind of show her the whole week. But then after that, she has to go and do a waitress job.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because you think, and she won the Tony Award.
Totally.
Yeah, and it's so, I don't know if the right word's bizarre, but it's fascinating because we think, you've been nominated, you've won this award, you're in the conversation that your life is set, you're a multi-millionaire, you're killing it financially. and that's not necessarily the game.
Oh, not at all. I think my net worth, I was talking to a dear friend of mine up in Sydney, and he's like, for some reason, he then just Googled what the internet thinks my net worth is.
This is my favourite game.
I think I'm up about somewhere in the 5 million
congratulations.
territory.
Can I have some?
Yeah, sure, man. Like, it's nothing. It doesn't feel like anything to me.
Yeah.
It's like, you bring it on yourself though, don't you? In terms of a job where you're putting yourself in the public eye and you're sort of curating your brand and everything, and you're trying to put your best foot forward and show yourself as some sort of admirable or, I don't know, interesting person. Yeah, people get the wrong idea, or they get a curated idea of who you are.
I know. I always find it interesting. Another guy, I might be misquoting him, Colin Mockery. He's one of the best improvisers. He was on Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah.
I think at one stage, I don't know if it was just before Whose Line Is It Anyway or during, but he almost declared bankruptcy.
Yeah.
But people will think, he's on Whose Line Is It Anyway? He's killing it. It's all this stuff. And we haven't quite realized that. It's also interesting because so many other guests have said that they don't have the money to go out for dinner, or they don't have, but the people see them this way.
Yeah.
And, that scares me because I used to be an accountant. Now I've transitioned to this.
Good move.
But I'm sure when you were first starting out, obviously, maybe money is or not necessarily a focus, but you would kind of like see it a bit differently to where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I mean, my experience, I can't speak for anyone else, but I was, poor through when I was a student in the mid-90s. I was living on a 3-hour shift at Bradman's handbag shop on a Sunday, and that would get me through the whole week.
Oh, wow.
And that's just student life, right? But you're young, you're bouncy, you don't care.
I eat 2-minute noodles.
Yeah, exactly. And then as you get older, well, as I've gotten older, you've got a few more commitments. You've got a family, you've got a mortgage, and so money you do start to increasingly make decisions based on pragmatic concerns.
Yeah.
But also the journey from Tripod is that we sort of suddenly got successful and money was not a factor.
Nice.
And I think you get this a lot, right, from celebs and stuff. And I certainly noticed it at the Grammys where Jay-Z's standing up there kind of going, hey, follow your heart, you'll be fine. And I'm like, well, yes and no.
Yeah.
You just think that because you've worked. I'm not saying he hasn't worked hard or isn't talented, but you forget that there are a lot of people who did follow their heart but just didn't have that luck, as well, right? So, and I think, I don't know, there's a level of, you're looking at it through the blinkers of success. Do you know what I mean? And it sort of, it can be a bit of a trap to think that you're sort of transcendent or that you've somehow, risen above such petty concerns as money. And it's like, well, you haven't actually. You're just not noticing that you happen to be doing quite well right now.
Yes, that's a very interesting. It's also the balance because I'm driven by like play, fun, creativity, collaboration, all of that. And that's because I didn't have that before. But, there's always highs and lows. We've had people on the podcast where, they're multimillionaires on a big show gets cancelled. Now they have to lose the house and all of that stuff, which is quite terrifying. I don't have the right answers from the money side. No one come to me for that. But what I find really interesting, so you've mentioned a bit of a transition, Tripod on hiatus, which we'll talk about. You mentioned off air that you're doing teaching, which sounds like a lot of fun. Although it might not necessarily be 100% what you wanted 30 years ago, it still sounds like you are really still focusing on the play, the fun. It might not always be play.
100%.
And I think that's the real success.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know a bit more.
Look,
and you do plenty of other stuff, which will...
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do lots of stuff. I've been so lucky in general, have been able to sort of follow my joy and,
nice.
and use the things that I love and that I'm passionate about. Somehow parlay those into a kind of a living, So that I'm always trying to remember my gratitude about that stuff. The teaching thing is just future-proofing, like what's next for me. I've got this skill set. I'm ready to pass it on. I don't have any, delusions about being a number one artist at the age of 52, And it's hard, my experience is it's progressively harder to get work as a freelancer as you get older too.
Is that because you're not hot if you're...
I mean, there's a lot of young, energetic, incredibly talented people out there, right? And I, a lot of my freelance work is in animation development. an illustrator as well. I write screenplay and, previously that's a jigsaw that kind of adds all together into one living,
Nice.
But it's less easy to rely on the freelance stuff as you get older. So it feels like teaching's a good just string to my bow and something what I've done of it I've absolutely loved. So.
I've also seen previously that you've done like classes as well.
You mean taught or taken
taught.
Yeah.
And I even saw that you like had a lesson for some, I don't remember what it was called, but some storyboard, like teaching creativity.
Oh, yeah. So I do look, an arts career certainly in Melbourne is for most people a very patchwork proposition, right? Like, so you're putting together a living out of going in lots of different directions and trying lots of different things and sort of pulling it together.
Yep.
Certainly that's my experience.
Yep.
So a lot of, children's book authors and children's book illustrators and stuff, you'll find a lot of their living they actually make through school visits and school incursions and the sort of teaching information transfer, sort of side of things. So in my capacity as in publishing as a kids book illustrator, I do a lot of that kind of, going into schools and teaching classes and so forth. I also teach creative writing at this beautiful little place in Carlton called the Melbourne Young Writers Studio. So I do a lot of work for them. And again, you pick up the work where you can, and if you're lucky, it's work you enjoy, and I'm certainly lucky in that regard.
I think that's so awesome because, life's not always linear. It doesn't always go up. And so many people, I'm not talking about money, that you've still, I don't know, I said this before, but to be able to follow your joy, that is a very awesome, like you've got that awareness as well.
Yeah.
You could be like, I want to be in tripod and continue at the highest of highs, but even in tripod, you had ups and downs.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what we want. But to still remind yourself, although it's not necessarily the same, could be better in some regards, could be worse in some regards, to remind yourself that you're following this. The thought of me ever going back to accounting is like what scares and haunts me.
So what made you, I know you should be asking the questions, but I'm curious about that choice for you about leaving accounting and going into the sort of creative stuff.
I thought I'm someone that has always had, I would say, strong mental health, something I work on. I've been doing it for years. And I don't say that as like I'm better than anyone. I just say it's something I've been active at for a long time.
Sure.
And also to put into perspective, I could not get out of bed during it. Okay. And I was like, there is something seriously wrong. And I was like, but I'm okay on the weekends, but I cannot do this. And I had stand-up comedy aspirations at the time. I was like, I'm not getting it. I don't feel funny. I feel, and I realized quite quickly, I wasn't there for that long.
Yeah.
That, first of all, the people that I was looking up to, the ones that were there for 20 years, they're not particularly happy. It's not particularly where I want my life to be. It's not a passion. I only did it because it was...
Totally.
I went to like a good school and I was lucky that I could go kind of through that system and would be okay. Like I knew I'd be okay. Yeah. And just, I was like, is this where I want to be for the next 20 years miserable? No, I can't do this. So then I did stuff along the way and studied a few things and can't go back.
It's a balance, isn't it? Between as we were talking about before, the pragmatic stuff and your own, this is personal mental health sustainability of how you spend your time.
And especially someone like me who hadn't really experienced much. I'm like, what? Like I didn't even know how to put it into words.
Yep.
But then as soon as I decided to leave, even when I was there for the 2 weeks or whatever, I'm like, I actually can function.
A dear, not beyond dear friend, his my stepbrother is a similar story. He was a sparky. He was an electrician. Didn't love it. Was sort of forced into it by our dear departed mutual dad, but hated it and was waking up depressed, same as you. And then he realised he could use that skill set in cinema lighting.
Whoa.
Right? And he was young at the time. He was maybe mid-20s when he had this revelation, early 20s, mid maybe. And now he's one of the top people working on the Hollywood films up in the Sydney studio. Is like one of the very top lighting guys.
A great story. And I know he was a bit of like a role model for you as well. Was he older than you?
My stepbrother?
Yeah.
I've got a couple.
I heard about one. I just don't know the name.
I've got... So my folks both remarried. So I ended up having 4 step siblings.
Okay.
You could be talking about my other stepbrother on my other side who was maybe 10 years older than me and first taught me the guitar.
Yes.
Wow, you've done some research.
I know everything. You sleep on the left side of the bed and
He first taught me Peter Gunn on the guitar and, a few basic little things, some scales and stuff, and got me moving on that thing. And also was just this older kind of role model, cool cat that I looked up to.
That is rare, though. You could see potentially a stepbrother as like maybe a threat, or I've heard all different stories.
Maybe you could, but that's never been in my kind of radar. My folks broke up when I was pretty young and remarried when I was pretty young, so I've never known any other, any other kind of frame. So no, I was very blessed with a sort of. We didn't all live together. It wasn't like the Brady Bunch or anything. Yeah. 2 of them were in Sydney, 2 of them were in Adelaide, and me and my sister were in Melbourne. But another one was a priest.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Gav, he was a priest. He is a priest. Lovely dude. So I had
a wide range. A
wide
lot of
range.
different perspectives.
Yeah.
But what did the brother that was the Sparky that's made that transition?
Yeah.
Because he similar. Did you say similar age?
Similar age. Yeah.
That's. I know you're probably in tripod at that stage, but isn't that quite a nice, refreshing outlook to kind of see that in the outskirts?
Well, we had sort of lost a bit of contact actually. So I've only really reconnected with him more recently. He reached out to me to do the crew T-shirts on one of the films he was working on. The designs for the lighting crew T-shirts. So that's how we sort of reconnected, and he good guy. Yeah, I'm fascinated to keep track of where he goes next.
I'm glad to hear that, and we've spoken a lot about tripod. I've introduced it in the introduction, so people are aware of it. But let's kind of get into it. I've got so many questions on this.
So do I. Let's try and help each other through it.
But you start. I think originally you start doing cover bands. Mm-hmm. You meet. Is his name Simon Hall? Jan?
Yeah, Jan. Yeah, right. Yeah. So, I was doing just random cover bands, but also, and, I'm sort of 18, 19 at this point, university musicals, right? And so that's how I met Jan. He first emerged from a plant in a Monash production of Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, literally, and I always make jokes. People always say, "Can I be in your screenplay?" Like, you can play a tree or a plant.
No, he was the plant.
Yeah.
So I first sort of laid eyes in the audience watching Little Shop, and he emerged from the gullet of this bad puppet to take his bow at the end. We were doing maybe Man of La Mancha with another friend of ours, Carlos, who was also a music theatre nerd like myself and Jan, and we started playing busking really.
Oh wow!
And doing little pub gigs and little harmony, sort of gigs, but mainly it was the busking thing to begin with, and it kind of went from there. And that was that was 91, 92 we started doing that.
That's when I was born. That is wild.
That's not depressing at all.
I think it's great. A lot of people, and we'll get into this as well, a lot of people can get success, but to be able to maintain success. And, Australia, we said it's a small market. There's not much going on. To me, the success is that you're trying different things with the skill set while you're still, looking with through the joy lens.
Yeah, I mean, people say, what's the thing you're most proud of? And I'm like, doing it, being able to do it. There's various specific songs or shows or whatever that I am a bit proud of, but I'm mainly proud of being able to make a living as an artist in Melbourne in the late 90s, 2000s.
It's remarkable. So I remember, we spoke briefly off air about my screenwriting. Yeah. And I've been, at times, I'm at a much better place with it. Why don't I have my screenplays? Why isn't it getting made? Yeah. All of that. And I think that's actually healthy to various degrees.
There's got to be some ambition or, like part of, as an artist, what you're doing, and I imagine this is the same for you, you're a fantasist, and it's not just the fantasy of the work the story you're writing. It's the fantasy of being able to see yourself in a position of like, maybe I'll get a show up, or maybe I'll, do whatever professional cool thing. That starts with a fantasy.
Yes,
it starts with a visualization of that thing happening, and then, when people talk about manifesting, well, that you've got to start with a vision.
Yeah, otherwise you...
But some people stop there.
Yep.
But other people are going to go, all right, well, I've had this vision. Now what are the steps to get me from where I am right now to that thing being real? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
we're on the
important
same.
thing, you
You
know?
have to see it to kind of believe it. If you
have
don't
to see
believe it, then it's
first,
not going to happen.
And then step 2 is, how do I get there?
And it will obviously never happen the way that you want,
No.
but just putting it out there, because if you don't believe it, I don't think anyone's going to tap you on the back.
100%. Yeah.
It's very interesting. One of my friends, he's in the stock space,
Okay.
and he's got a completely different worldview to me, and I love it.
Yeah.
And he loves stocks. I hated being in sort of that world. He loves it. And I love people. You can like something that I don't like at all, but if you love it, I love it.
Sure.
It's so
Yeah,
contagious.
absolutely.
And he was telling me he's going to be the number one like stock investment broker, not investment broker, but investment. And I was like, number one. And he's like, why would I aim for number 2 or number 3? And not from an arrogant point of view. He's basically saying, I want to be the best that I can be.
Yeah.
Why do I need to limit in my mind what I'm going to be?
Make excuses for yourself or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. So he asked me, where do you want your show to be? I'm like, I just want like a season. He's like, why would you just ask for a season? Ask for the 5 seasons, see it. And it actually really changed my perspective because, it's how, also the way that you see it, and I'm no manifesting expert, but I truly believe you have to create it in your mind and then, obviously do work and create it.
Yeah.
Because you can't a lot of people want to do things, but it's actually putting pen to paper or whatever it is.
Totally. I mean, this is this is what people talk about with the 5% inspiration, 95% perspiration, right?
Mm.
Which is a aphorism that's as old as the hills, but it kind of covers the same thing, right? You have the idea and then you do all the work to do what you can to make that thing happen. And it still might not,
Exactly.
But you don't know what other opportunities are going to sort of tumble out of that process as well, which is kind of the story of my career.
I want to hear. I'll just finish the writing point.
Yeah.
Even writing through. So I was writing before the podcast, and podcast has led for other writing potential opportunities and all of that stuff. But the advice that I got was, regardless what happens, obviously you want your shows, you want to be a showrunner. Yeah. I've written 5 shows, a movie, a spec script, all of this stuff. But you need to enjoy the process.
Yes.
And that was really hard for me. It took me a while, and I'm no expert. I'd love to know, is there anything that kind of springs? I can see you nodding.
No. That's really good advice. You have to like it for what it is. And the other one that I try and police, because I think I might have even heard this on a podcast, but someone sort of saying, if you're imagining success as all the great things that'll sort of come to you and the showing up to awards ceremonies in in a tux and people knowing what your name is and the adulation and all the ego food stuff, that's not going to get you there.
I agree.
Right? You've got to be imagining the work, enjoying the work and doing good work. And all the ego, kind of garnishments beyond that, don't aim for that. That's not a thing to aim for. Aim for the doing good work.
Yeah, it's remarkable. That's very good advice.
Yeah.
But we focus, because we think
do.
the success, we spoke about the Grammys, we think that is the success. It's not all the things that have gotten us there. Yeah. That's really good way of looking at it.
Yeah, totally.
Also, it's not a long-term way of looking at things just for the awards.
Yeah.
Because as you said, there's so many other variables. It's all externals. You can't control that.
Yeah.
You could actually have the best movie, the best piece of art, but someone's going to judge it through their lens. And we've had,
Totally, absolutely. And you see it in kids too. A lot of them are like, I want to be famous. You're like, well, that's not an answer.
That's the scariest thing that
what do you want to do? A lot of the people who are famous, fame is just this weird sort of side effect of them doing the thing they loved and were good at. That's the thing they
Yes. It's something I definitely don't chase. I think I would have wanted it at the start.
Yeah.
But then after hearing so many people about, there's definitely pros and cons, as you would know. But it's not something where I want to walk out of my house and like have a paparazzi. I know that doesn't really happen here. I want to be very good at what I do and still remain inspired and creative and all of that. So going back to Tripod, we're talking about,
Are you recording this on that? Is that where, it's all going into that?
Yeah.
Cool. Anyway, sorry, a little technical.
No, where?
I don't know. I was just like, I could see the mixing board, but then I'm like, where's the actual recording device? It's all one sort of thing.
Yeah. Easy for someone who is so technologically inept.
Yeah, and I probably wouldn't have asked that question if I wasn't 1,000 years old. Anyway.
What would, in an ideal world, I'd have a massive setup, but this is pretty good for...
This is great. I'm impressed. Sorry, I interrupted.
No. I need to learn more. I just got this when I first started, and I haven't learned and grown. Everything that I say, I encourage people to do. I have not done.
And you've pressed record. That's what I'm always like paranoid about.
I have not clicked record once.
Oh, really?
Have you ever had an experience?
Oh, many times.
But was it more like you're recording something and then you're like, oh, this is the best verse ever, put it up?
Yeah, all that. I'm actually a really bad audio person. I don't have the patience. I'm really ramshackle with the kind of detail that you need to get good, proper recorded audio and mixing and stuff.
You're looking at the wrong guy.
Anyway, sorry.
No. I think I keep it so you have had many of those.
As a guest, I have. That can be.
Oh, as a guest.
Yeah.
That's the word. So the recording, if we don't record me, I don't care.
Yeah.
Are you coming here for your time, having a great conversation and not clicking record?
Yeah.
That is the worst thing that can ever happen to me.
No, it's happened to me. That's why I'm a little paranoid about it. That's why I got distracted. Sorry,
no.
Michael.
I will go back to Tripod, and I'm very curious about this. So what's it like? They've made a mistake. You're also frustrated and annoyed. Do you then redo it and now you have to...
The times it's happened to me, once in a while I've just gone, oh, well, don't worry about it then. I'm too, because I might be busy or whatever. But often it'll just be a case of rescheduling.
Yep.
Just doing it again.
Because it's hard to do it right, unless if it's like 5 or 10 minutes.
Well, it's just hard to get the sort of spontaneity and joy back if you just haven't covering the same topics.
I've done it before.
Yeah.
I had to get a guest come in a second time.
Yeah.
And one, I don't know if I've revealed this one yet. I would assume because you're in similar circles, John Safran.
Oh, yeah.
I have not told him this. He, the recording came out, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
He was one of my first podcasts. And I think I was implying he should come back again.
Right.
I didn't quite know how to handle it. I hired 3 people to try and fix the audio.
Wow.
None of them could do it. One of my friends, he saw the problem. He's a engineer.
Yeah.
And he's like, he spent 10 or 12 hours at my house. And I was like, I've got like a party. He's like, I will do this. Just because he saw the challenge.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for him. He was just playing around with on Audacity, a pretty crap program, and he fixed it. It wasn't amazing, but it was good enough where people
hear it. Yeah.
And that would have been, I think I would have retired. Podcast number 6 or 8. Oh, brutal. Anyway, so from the Tripod sense, you meet Jon. You obviously correct me along the way.
Yeah.
I think you met 2 different people to join this group.
Yeah, so there was Carlos. So Carlos, myself, and Jon were the first original lineup.
Yep.
Then Carlos went to Perth to pursue his music theatre ambitions at WAPA over there.
Yep.
And that's when another friend, Mark Doggett, joined. And he sang with us for a while, and then Carlos came back, and then we were way too gutless to make a decision. So there was a period there for a while where we were actually we were playing alternate week gigs with a different guy in the middle.
And did they know this?
Oh, no, they knew.
Oh, yeah.
The audience knew, and the audience started asking who's the middle guy next week, right, and making their decisions, right, fair enough, based on like who was going to be playing.
Did they have similar skill set?
Oh, different charismas and different kind of...
But could you not have them together?
Oh, didn't even occur to us. Not for 1 minute did that ever come up until you just said it just then.
Really? Is it just like we have to be a 3?
We were so locked into that. Isn't that funny? Anyway, mercifully, they both went their separate ways, and we needed to find a new permanent third person.
Yep.
And that ended up being Mr. Stephen Gates, which as soon as Gatesy joined, that changed everything.
And was this a hobby or more a career at that stage?
It was, we were students at the time. I was living on almost nothing anyway. So it was a very blurry line between hobby and career.
Yep.
But we were doing gigs. We were busking a lot, but we were also starting to play shows at venues, and there was a lot more. I mean, it's the 90s, so there was a lot of live stuff going on, cover bands that we would open for, and we used to play on Greville Street a lot. There was a venue over in Yarraville called the Commercial. We used to play very regularly.
Heard about this one,
there were gigs and there were bands to open. We used to play a place called the Ritz, which is now I think an Elephant and Wheelbarrow in St Kilda.
Yep. I think that's closed down.
Has it?
I think. I'm getting the name potentially.
Yeah, it's just on, I think, Grey Street and
I used to go
Fitzroy
there
Street.
a fair bit.
Yeah, I mean, I just lived around the corner. It was good times. We used to just walk up with my guitar and play the show to a puzzled crowd who had come generally to see bands with names like Explosive Hits.
Yep.
Play rockin' covers that they could dance to, and then there's these three nerds up there singing comical takes on the work of Simon and Garfunkel. In cool. 3-part harmony, we were just so weird, but we didn't know it, and that's often the case. I think.
I think that's good.
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
There's always a stand-up comedian. If they actually knew how they were perceived the first few times, they would never do it again. That's why I call it positive delusion. When did the comedy aspirations come in? Was that the goal, or did you?
No, it was never the goal. It was.
Wow.
It was. We were just having fun and being ourselves, and also I was an absolute appalling guitar player, so I needed a strategy to cover all my many fuck ups.
Yeah.
So there was a sense of fun in the band anyway, and we would chat to the audience and muck around just being ourselves. So it was kind of cabaret. But I was also working as a theatre tech at a venue in South Yarra called St. Martin's, and we were at that time programming a comedy festival. Program, in our various venues at St. Martin's, and we had an empty slot, right, which was something like the 9 o'clock slot or whatever that we didn't have an act for yet, and so that's when I put my hand up and said to the programmer, "Hey, look, if you don't find anyone, I've got this band, and we could easily get up and do an hour." Just to cover the slot, right?
That's wild,
right?
Yeah.
So there's absolutely no way we would have been in comedy if we didn't happen to live in a
You reckon
town that has a festival.
That was the point that...
Yeah. Oh, 100%. That's when we started being judged on those terms, in terms of like joke writing and people laughing and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, you morph to fit those expectations and try and sort of hit the brief. And so the Comedy Festival was definitely the thing that funneled us into capital C comedy.
And your life changed like that.
Pretty quick,
Your perspective on music as well.
Well, in terms of my relationship to music, I am not good enough to be a genuine successful musician, just genuinely not good enough of a player. So comedy was a sort of a backdoor into being a musician.
Oh,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's something you're obviously very good at, but you feel you're not maybe at the A+ and you're maybe an A.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
and
so the comedy was our angle on it. And I think that's a bit of a message that I try and keep in mind talking to people about, if they're thinking about a career in music, is like being a pop star is not the only way to be a musician, right? There's so many other sort of fields and areas of music that you can get into and enjoy, and I'm an example of that, right?
I don't know if you know, he's Sydney-based Ilan Kidron.
No.
He was the front man for the Potbellies.
Okay.
I had him on the podcast. He's also doing my wedding, which is exciting.
Delightful.
And he was talking about, so, I don't know if he's doing tens of thousands of people. He's one of the, sold the most albums or singles, one of them, numbers-wise, one of the greatest musicians Australia's had to offer.
Amazing.
And he was saying that, amongst other things, but he got so much joy, even during that time doing weddings.
Yeah.
Now he helps songwrite for other people.
Yeah.
He does workshops.
Yep.
I'm sure he didn't say this, but I'm sure he does talk. There's so many different avenues, but I'm sure at the time he didn't say this, so no one take this as gospel. But, he would have had the blinkers on. I am like a big musician, tens of thousands of people, and then it's so nice from my end to see all the wonderful things that he can do while still, pursuing his...
Yeah, that's right. And you can even be that big musician in front of 10,000 people and it lasts a year and a half. And now what are you going to do, right? So, it's important to think with a pretty broad peripheral vision about how you can, apply and enjoy those skills.
Agreed. And he's actually gone back to the Potbelly, so who knows?
Cool.
And he's still, this is what I love, I wouldn't say despite all that, having all of that fame and success, so many people are screaming, calling you, and he says that he likes to come back to weddings because that allows him. He said he's not the best musician at a wedding. He's with these people. He's gets to explore and play and have fun. And
absolutely. Sometimes it's those community smaller gigs that are really the satisfying ones. Absolutely.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
So when do you start to change your ambition or your drive or what you want when you meet Gatesy? Because Gatesy was also a bit of a turning point.
Yeah, very much a turning point.
Yeah.
in fairness of context, Gates is an amazing performer, and it definitely was a chemistry that really clicked on stage
Just
when
like
Gatesy
that?
joined. Yeah, pretty quick.
Oh, nice.
But not to minimise the thing that came along with Gatesy, which is the amazing Michelle Van Ray, who they were together at the time, and Michelle put her hand up to manage the band.
Oh, nice.
Now Michelle is to this day a really significant player in the entertainment landscape as a manager, right?
Oh, I think I've been emailing.
Okay.
Does she represent people?
Yeah.
Yeah, that name sounds very familiar.
So Michelle's a very, very dear friend. In fact, of all the managers we've ever kind of worked with over the years, she came to the Grammys, to support us, to root for us, even though she hasn't managed us for 20 years.
Wow, I like that.
She's an amazing person, right? So, yes, not to minimise Gatesy's incredible kind of electricity on stage, but the other part of the package was that we suddenly had a strategic mind putting us in the conversation in terms of booking us gigs and publicity and all that kind of stuff. And so Michelle had an immense amount to do with the way things went kind of vertical all of a sudden.
And also the work that you two put in before that.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, there was a real basis of a philosophy going on that we'd developed up to that point.
So when do you start to realize, okay, I can actually kind of sustain this more full time? I don't need to do kind of the other stuff.
So as I say, I was a technician at this theatre. We talk about failure. There was a change. There's a lot of politics going on at that theatre at the time. This is the late 90s. And I suddenly found myself the technical manager of this theatre. And I was like a year and a half out of uni. I did not know what the F I was doing.
Yeah.
I was terrible and still am at scheduling. It's a freaking miracle I'm here at all. And so I had double booked our main venue.
That's so good.
Right?
That's like the most important thing, right?
Yeah. I was terrible. I was such a terrible technician. Like, I remember one time, this is a sidebar, but I remember one time I started a show before the audience had come in. It was a one-man show. This poor lad was down there doing a monologue whilst the audience were coming in. I just had gotten all the wrong signals from the front of house person. I was just terrible. Anyway.
That's pretty good. So is the guy like, why am I performing?
Yeah, the light comes up on him. He's like, right, off I go. And he starts pouring his heart out to empty seats. Oh.
But could you also imagine the guy? Also, we're all human. We all make mistakes. But he might also think he didn't sell any tickets.
Yeah, all of that. All of that. And it was all me. I was terrible. Anyway, so I had basically blundered this job as a technical manager at this venue. But it also happened to correspond with me coming back from Edinburgh. I think it was our second visit to Edinburgh, so 99.
Yep.
And things sort of taking off at that point. We suddenly had a kind of, a level of, credibility or maturity or something. So people started buying tickets to our Prince Pat shows, and we could start to feel
in Edinburgh or here?
No, in Collingwood. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Edinburgh was fine, but
Edinburgh's
it's having
hard.
been to Edinburgh that was the takeaway. Not only did it help our credibility, but we'd seen so much. It really broadened our horizons in terms of what was possible. So that corresponded with me, my job at the theatre being a complete bin fire. And the reason I bring that up is that I quit the job, right? In fact, it was just before leaving for the second Edinburgh. But I, to this day, can't tell you if it's because my band took off or because I had failed so hard at that.
It could be a bit of
both, right?
Yeah,
and maybe I've been telling myself a certain story all these years, but like maybe it was just because I sucked and had to and would have left that job anyway or sort of run away.
Nice.
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right, but it was about then. It was about
sounds
the
like the
99.
right time.
Yeah,
both ways.
It was. That's right.
Edinburgh's tough to come back with confidence. We've had. Like no one succeeds there. There's so many acts, so many acts. There's only a finite amount of people.
Yeah.
And there's no social media, which just still makes it hard.
Yeah.
And you are probably with the pamphlets. You're probably doing everything you can to try and get people.
Oh, it's tough. I mean, I have an image of on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. This sums up Edinburgh for me. Is I was just watching a busker and she was doing juggling and. A bit of unicycle, cute little sort of cabaret dress on, whatnot. Had a little gaggle of people watching. Kids, it was a kids show she was doing. Hoops, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was across the street and I kind of looked across to see her, and I looked across at the moment where she fell down and hit her head on the concrete.
Holy
right,
shit.
you could hear it across the street.
Oh, you could. Okay, that's.
And then you could tell there's this split second where she's just lying on the ground looking at the sky going, what the fuck am I doing here? And then just gets back up and just gets on with the show, right? And like to me, that was just Edinburgh through and through. It is just hard work, you know, and graft. And you get to that second week and maybe your show hasn't taken off like the way you hoped it would, and you have to fight. You go into the room of mirrors about what am I doing here? What did I expect? I'm on the other side of the world. What an idiot, you know.
Yeah.
But of course, you come home and you wouldn't swap it because it's an incredible adventure, you know.
That I really like your outlook and your mindset, because you know most people I've spoken to lose money, and then all the other stuff that we've spoken about, just to come back with confidence. A lot of people can be derailed by that experience, and really, I know you talked about all the doubts. Yeah, you had them, but you still you took the positives from it.
There was so much to learn. I mean, there was so much to learn. It was just such an eye opener for us. We were naive. I mean, I had a kind of theatre degree by that point, like in production at VCA. So I'd seen a bit of theatre, but it's a pretty narrow window of what that actually is. But then you go to Edinburgh where people from all over the world are bringing all sorts of outlandish shit to the table. For me, the thing that sums up the sort of learning side of Edinburgh is we shared a venue with the four, what were they called? The three Canadians, right? Who were a kind of impro, slapstick, kind of, they put on this narrative show. And the night we went, we were watching from the balcony and everything went wrong, right? That one of the guys' shoes came flinging off and the sets fell over, and you know, one of them forgot his lines and started climbing the walls. And well, this is hilarious. Absolute chaos. The audience were in just fits of laughter, and we thought it was the funniest thing we'd ever seen. Chaos, right? Oh, how lucky we are to be at this one night where all this stuff went wrong.
Wow.
Right? And then the next night, you know, it's after the show, we just go back and check it out again. The guy's shoe comes flinging off, the set falls over, the dude forgets his lines and starts climbing the walls. It's all put on, right? Fake's the wrong word, but it's something that maybe did accidentally happen,
and then they kept it
at
going.
some point, but they kept it in, right? And so that was a huge thing for us, of like the kind of smoke and mirrors that goes into comedy. You know, the idea of making it seem real.
Yes.
When it's actually, you know, arranged and scripted.
I feel like that would really help with you guys in your performance. I had
very much. Yeah.
Colin Lane from Lano and Woodley, and he kind of insinuates that, you know, I've seen a lot of their shows over the years where it looks like there's a lot of mistakes, and we love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And it's a fine line between just theatre and just sort of some sort of, you know, dishonesty of pulling the wool over people's eyes. Lano and Woodley were another massive inspiration for us.
Were they similar time?
A little earlier,
Yep.
only a little, but I remember seeing their show Curtains, I think it was at the Athenaeum, and it completely changed my life in terms of what Tripod could get away with and what we could do in a frame to put across it.
I like that you can see, and you know, impro can go really bad. I'm not talking about them. And to still learn from a potentially bad show, I'm sure it was fine.
Yeah.
That's pretty, because, you know, sometimes a lot of people can be in their ego. We've done this is how we've been successful. Yeah. But, you know, doing the research and hearing about you, it sounds like you guys have been pretty good with being able to not only adapt, but like pick things along the way that could.
Yeah, no, I mean, I am proud of Tripod. It probably doesn't make commercial sense, but just creatively in terms of soul food and staying interested, we definitely did dramatically change direction fairly regularly in terms of the kind of thing you could expect from us.
Yep.
So we would just do silly sort of three guys in a row stand-up cabaret sort of format shows, right? Songs, just a bunch of different songs. And we did those for a couple of years, and we got a reputation through doing that. And then all of a sudden we did a show called Tosswinkle the Pirate, which is suddenly we're doing a musical, a narrative musical, right? And then the following year we did one called Lady Robots. And so the audience are going, well, this is not, we didn't know you did that, you know?
Yeah.
So you do lose some audience, but then you gain some as well. And also what you get is just staying interested yourself. And then we'd go back to the cabaret, then, you know, we've done a bunch of different kinds.
That's also very rare, and maybe that's one of the key attributes towards your success is a lot of, I think Colin Lane also talked about this where, you know, and there's always a balance where I kind of feel you have to be very similar so the audience expects you of a certain way. But you also want the creative. You want to feel like your soul's on fire.
Totally.
You want to do this for the long haul. So there's kind of balance. And most people I've spoken to have not been able to find potentially the balance.
It's a hard balance. Yeah. It's a hard balance because you're gambling with people's expectations. You're gambling with your own skill set. You can't always be as good at the new thing as you were at the old thing because you haven't done it as long, right? So, it's a very vulnerable position to put yourself in because you're learning very publicly in front of people.
I love that. I'm sure you understand it way better than me, but I also think you don't understand how rare that is. A lot of people, they've got the success. Let's hold on to it. 30 plus years. Yes, there's been, breaks here and there. Super rare. Yeah. I would also imagine, I'm sure you guys had a big ego at times, but also you knew when to let go of the ego. To be able to do something like that means you guys are probably aware of the ego conversation.
It's a good question. I've often thought about what showbiz did to me in terms of my ego and whether it helped me be a better or worse person. There's definitely a power structure that comes with being in the public eye, right? Yep. You've earned a certain amount of regard. Well, you haven't earned it. You just receive a certain amount of regard from people that you haven't necessarily earned by being nice to them. How
are you? Good. Now give me my coffee.
That's exactly right. So, you have to be on your guard. I was certainly vulnerable to that. I had a certain amount of arrogance and, kind of ego and entitlement.
And you're also very young.
I was, yeah. And I was raised very much in a system that turned all its energy to turning out entitled white straight boys. Do you know what I mean? Who felt like they were the princes of the universe. So I had to unlearn that. Luckily, I went to the VCA after going to the Dead Poets Society school, and that changed everything in terms of my political, frame.
We won't get into the politics, but in terms of your mindset shift, did you feel that you were not quite the person you wanted to be, or you just saw kind of the world in a potentially linear way?
In that example, it was about diversity.
Yeah.
I'd come from an all-boys school of, for the most part, really well-off people. Not me. I was on a scholarship there, but for the most part, pretty well-off people. So I only had a very narrow frame on the universe, really, and going to VCA where there was just people from all walks of life.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
Improv did that for me as well, and it's just very interesting because I was in a massive. Well, everyone's in a bubble.
Yeah.
I was in a smaller bubble, and it was just really interesting. Just from, and I'll go back into what we were talking about before, but this is just a nice reminder to me. I thought that my sense of humor was the sense of humor. This is how dumb I am. Because, I emulated through successful sitcoms. I'm not saying that but I saw that. And then I go to improv and I see some types of humor I don't like, but that's also because I'm a bit biased because I've never seen them before. But then within week 1, week 2, I think I was pretty quick and go, I would never approach my comedy like that. That is fascinating. Yeah. How did you approach it? That is such an interesting way of looking at the world. Very interesting, and I think it's helped with screenwriting, and I've kept it more to a comedy approach, but it was really interesting.
Absolutely. And I often think back on certain songs, certain things we've done where, some stuff I'm proud of, but of course inversely, some stuff I just wish, I hope, never surfaces again, that never sees the light of day. Some stuff that's really ignorant and based on assumptions and, unbacked up, thoughts or default kind of assumptions. But anyway, to your point, that's another reason why things like Edinburgh are so good, because it breaks open
Well, even you learning from the improv people, which you may have not done before. I heard you speak on Will Anderson's podcast, Philosophy, about what was the word, where you might not necessarily be as proud of things you've done before. Obviously, times have changed and we need to be aware of that. Yeah. But is there also, and a lot of stand-ups, and also we're all growing, we're all learning, you were never bad intentioned, blah, 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 blah. And even if you were, you grow, which you weren't, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally know.
What's kind of that relationship there? Because a lot of people I've spoken to, there's a bit of a fear, like, can I be cancelled? I'm not talking about like cancel culture, or someone will see it and think I'm a jerk. Whereas if they see a more holistic version of you, they realize, you're just trying your best to, be in this world.
Oh, there's material that we've done that has meant that, that went on an album, and now that means we can't sell that album anymore. Like only last week we we ditched about, I want to say, like 300 copies of this particular CD because it had a song on it that I'm not only not proud of, but kind of embarrassed to have done, right? So, yeah, those are out there. You know, when any of my students that I teach come to class,
That wasn't me. That was a ghostwriter.
yeah.
AI,
you know, if they start Googling, what did you used to do? You know, sir.
Yeah.
You know, and they twig. I'm proud of what I've done, but there's also this little bit of, I hope they don't find this, and this, the things that
I think, I know we focus on certain issues and like we tweet about it and all that stuff. No, I'm making this up. Yeah. This is factual. So 90+% of people are, you know, they understand all of this stuff. It's just sometimes the small. Anyway, putting it out there, I probably said fucking terrible things on this podcast, but I'm trying my best, and I think that comes across. And also within you as a person, and also your career, people can see that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you try and see yourself as a project, don't you?
Yeah.
You know, like I'm very lucky in the sense that whatever blessing I was given, one of them was I love learning. You know, I love being exposed to new things, and I guess I try and be humble about that, and always know that I don't know. You know.
That's also very rare. So I'm fascinated by this because I think this is also, you know, 30 plus years plus all the other stuff you've done. Yeah. You can't really not have that mindset. And, you know, as I said, some people have success for a few years and then they kind of fade away because maybe they're approaching it more from an ego point of view. Yeah. Yes, you've spoken about ego, but I still think you would have been somewhat accountable to yourself.
I hope so. It's, you know, there's this scene in Looper, you know, the film Looper?
Yes.
Where Bruce Willis's character meets, I think it's Gordon-Levitt, what's his name? Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, who is a younger version of himself.
What
and
twist.
All he can think
you
of
just
is...
spoiled it.
Oh, no, wait, it's not at the end. It's in the middle somewhere.
Yep.
But he's just got such derision for this young version of himself. He absolutely hates him. He's like, you naive, egotistical, ignorant little putz. Who do you think you are, right? And there's something about that scene that really speaks to me. I kind of feel like, certainly me, I do tend to see my younger self with disregard or, you know, with disappointment.
Is there still a kindness and a recognition of what you've...
I hope so, but not naturally. I have to do that bit mentally. I have to kind of go, no. I'm sure he was fine. You're just remembering the bad things.
Which is naturally what we do. Yeah. And that's how you rewire your brain. Is when we go through those moments, is to like, I did this, I did this. Yeah. Yes, more kind. We all have that, and that's
which is to the point of the podcast. Failure it's a mechanism of learning, right? Like that's how, you know, you don't learn anything from success. You learn from mucking up, and that's going to come with certain embarrassing memories.
Actually, you were talking about this. I'm going all over the place, but I love this. I want to paint the picture because you just mentioned the albums. I think you're at the ARIAs. You're with Will Anderson.
Yeah,
you win an award right at the ARIAs.
That year, I don't think we did win. That was one of the many nominations. But
fantastic. You know, we're talking about the contrast of the highs and the lows. And Will Anderson says to you, by the way, I love Will Anderson. He's been on the podcast. Hey, I really liked your album. You know, a lot of people can say you're amazing, I love your album, but they don't actually listen to it. Yeah. And he actually listened to it. Yeah. And he's like, by the way, there's a 15-second lull between each song. What is going on in your mind? You're at the ARIAs, you've been nominated, and then you hear that. Yeah,
so that was the second song in our album. And our big idea was that we were going to, because those songs, what we used to do on Triple J was we would write these songs based on prompts from either Will and Adam or from the audience, you know, and we would have an hour to write the songs, and that was the game. And then we would put out records of them. But they were so contextual, you needed to know what the prompts were and why this song, you know, otherwise it would just seem like this nonsense thing, right? Like it's all about context. And so on this particular record, we got a little drunk actually whilst we did this, but we recorded little spoken bits between each song that told you what the topics were and everything. Yep. But we didn't want to list them as track numbers for various aesthetic but also technical reasons. We wanted them to be in the gap between the songs, but not listed with track numbers. Anyway, that was the reason for the technical mess up, and all these albums came out. You know, they got released into the market, and Will was the only person.
Wow.
And we were sitting next to someone from the ABC, right, when he said that. And we all just sort of looked at each other. It was super awkward because, like, not only did it mean that none of us had listened to the record, but the person from the ABC hadn't even listened to the record. In fact, the only person was Will, who actually spotted this mess up, right?
Is that like one of those moments where we just nod and we never talk about it?
No, that was recalled. The record was recalled. You know, well, recalled, whatever that means. But they stopped selling them, and you could take them back and get your money back, and we had to re-release it. But by that point, the horse had bolted.
Look, it's not the end of the world.
No,
I'm sure like people would just kind of realize. But what is that? I'm sure you've been drinking as well. This moment to celebrate you guys amongst others. That is, to me, that's also, you mentioned the Grammys, but that is the definition of like the industry, the highs. And
the lows. Yeah, for sure. Look, I can't remember the immediate sort of fallout on the night. I think we were just too excited to be there and kind of went, I must look at that next on Monday.
We'll sweep it under
hangover. And just be sort of kind to the ABC person who was there and not
like, you're never going to amount to anything. You'll never work in this industry again. Yeah.
I don't think there was any of that vibe. I don't think we could credibly blame anyone but ourselves. I mean, you hope, that you do get surrounded by a bunch of people who are trying to help you do work and who see it as their job to take hurdles out of and obstacles out of your way.
Yep.
And that can really hurt your getting a more mature process, right, when there's no obstacles in your way. You have to be, I think, quite vigilant at understanding what is actually your own responsibility. And I hope we did that at that moment.
That is really interesting. I'm not sure if you know him, Rob Mills, also a singer. He spoke about, in long story short, that the peak of Australian
Mills
Idols.
Is great.
Millsy. He was here not so long ago.
Yeah.
And wonderful story. And this really was a catalyst for his change. But he had a manager that did everything for him. Literally, I'm not sure if you've heard it, but I'll just summarize it for the audience. I think even besides groceries, she was doing everything for him. And there's nothing like right or wrong. It's just his life.
That's the dynamic.
Yeah. And then when he let her go amicably and they're fine and blah, 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 he was like, how do I actually like function?
Yeah.
Because he had everyone in his world was kind of a yes man.
Yeah.
And I feel like you sort of had that to some degree. You probably had more autonomy, but you would have been surrounded by people who are like doing this for you all along the way.
Totally, absolutely, and they see it as their job, and you, to an extent, see it as their job. And there's a what do they call that when two organisms, need each other? There's a level of that, whatever that is, between those people who are kind of good at the admin and the detail and the getting you to the airport on time stuff, and those people who, for whatever reason, whether it's neurological or just can't be fucked, are not good at it, right? So there's a level of codependency that goes on.
Yeah, that's the word.
But you just super have to be careful because you can create monsters that way,
So I feel like you've had a bit of an awareness. So then as maybe Tripod's not doing as much in a certain year, maybe there's less of that in your life. So was it a bit of a transition period?
Yeah, I was always really from the get-go, and maybe this is just because I have a short attention span or whatever, but I was always really focused on, okay, like Tripod's great, I'm really proud of it, I'm happy to, hold this tiger by the tail and see where it takes me. But meanwhile also, who am I outside that, creatively?
Oh, you're having those...
Yeah, maybe not right from the get-go, but from like the mid-aughts, probably after Skid House, I'd say.
I love Skid House.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm like proud of it too, actually. It seems to have legs, people still...
This long, I don't know where it was aired. I had Foxtel at the time.
Sure.
And isn't it crazy that a show like that, I'm sure people still bring it up or have over the years.
Yeah. Kids, teenagers.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was a game. I actually think that was one of the positive influence on how I see things. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, we were proud of it. We were just a bunch of kids in a room working, just kind of trying to be worthy of this opportunity that came along.
So
yeah, it was a fun thing to be part of. a lot of good memories. I took it a little for granted at the time because it had coincided with Tripod being insanely busy. We were doing lots of radio. We were touring. We were in airports and hotel rooms just constantly, right? So balancing that and doing this sketch comedy show was a challenge.
I feel like even though you're very popular at the time, it would have put more eyes on you through another arena as well. Because I know, who have I had? Damien Callanan, Michael Chamberlain, the late Cal Wilson. Yeah. I might be forgetting someone else. And, people that have spoken to me, remember them from Skid House as their first.
It was incredible for that. It was our in terms of our public profile, it was a little schizophrenic because it was, those are those comedian guys from Skid House. But meanwhile, we were doing the Triple J segment, which is more like, here's this band who have this interesting ability to write strange songs. Yeah. And the two halves of that audience, they didn't fight each other, but they didn't they weren't all the same people necessarily.
That the pros and cons in that you've got another group of eyeballs. But you also mentioned you were asking yourself deep questions somewhere around this stage.
Yeah, like who am I outside this? Like where do I end and the other two begin? And what are my skill sets? And ironically, I think it was Don't Forget Your Toothbrush, which Tim Ferguson hosted from the Doug Anthony All-Stars. This was after the Dougs, and also Paul's career after that. He went on to do all that Good Newsweek stuff and things. And Tripod was just starting out at the time, and I remember thinking, oh, that's great. Yeah, use the trio as a launching pad for your solo, career, for whatever you do after that, right? And so that's what it was in my head. But that window of it finishing and me going on to the next thing just never came because interesting gigs just kept coming.
Oh, so it kept on pulling you.
Yeah. So it took a lot longer than was the original plan.
Did you kind of see it as a stepping stone, towards what you do individually?
Yeah, I mean, everything, in the arts, everything you make is a stepping stone, isn't it, to whatever the next thing is. But yeah, that's how I saw it. I saw it as a really cool, fun thing to do, like a launch pad, a place to develop my skills, and then we'll see what happens next. And just the what happens next thing, it was just a constant juggle because Tripod just kept being interesting.
That's so nice.
Yeah,
that's so interesting. And then actually we'll finish, and then I'll talk about the other stuff that you're doing. Yeah. How have you been able to kind of balance not only the personalities within Tripod, but your voice?
Yeah,
the voice of the whole and your voice might not always be in alignment.
Yep. Totally.
Tell me.
Constant balance. Difficult sometimes for all three of us, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a silver bullet or an easy answer to that one. We had a particular dynamic in the rehearsal room. We did try and change it up, in terms of what our methods were. We would write different ways for different projects and stuff just to try and find different dynamics in the room. For a long time it was only kind of collaborative stuff, and then for a long time we would bring our own stuff in and work on it together. There's all kinds of iterations of how that kind of would come out. Look, sometimes you come up with something that's better than any one of you could have, and I honestly believe that being in a room with Gatesy and Jon makes me a better writer. Definitely, no question.
Yep, nice.
Because they've got angles. Jon in particular has just such a strange lens on the world that it bounces you in other directions, and also it keeps you honest in terms of quality, and and there's an honesty that goes on there inside the Tripod room that I think is difficult and challenging, but also really creatively profitable. Right? I'm often put in mind of this moment where Freddie Mercury in the biopic comes back from doing his solo projects, and he says, yeah, they did everything I wanted to the band, about the session musicians, and the band was like, what's the problem with that? He's like, the problem is they did everything I wanted,
Yeah.
Tripod never had that problem. It was always, it was always a debate and a tension there, which I think at best gets you something that you couldn't necessarily have done yourself. At worst, gets you something that's a compromise, that doesn't really hit anyone's sort of vision, So that's the navigation.
Did you have final, because the three of you, was it majority wins?
Yeah, it was. In the end, it was majority wins, which is, I think, in a way how things are sustainable, but is also can create frustrations as well.
Was there ever a point, and I don't want to like necessarily get into the dynamics,
Yeah.
but I'm interested in how you thrived and,
Yeah.
the challenges there in a group. Was there ever a moment where, maybe they both won and you're like, I cannot do this. I'm not doing this.
Early on, there was one that had a bunch of sort of sound effects in it and stuff that I just thought was really a little offensive to certain sectors. And I was pretty close to leaving the band. This is this is before we had any success or anything over that.
Yep.
But I still think that's as close as we came to really standing out there and saying something I just can't get behind.
Yep.
Other times it's just a leap of faith. You learn that sometimes you're wrong and you've got to at least try a thing. Like that's, put it out on stage. See if let the audience decide if it's working or not.
I really like this mindset.
Yeah.
Because you can come from fear to vulnerability. Oh, we're going to lose it, all of that stuff. But, let's just try it on stage.
Yeah.
Creative risk can be very scary for most.
Yeah. Look, if there's a real passion for the idea, and then you've got to kind of go, okay, let's try it. Let's see what happens.
I can see why you guys have been doing it for so long. You mentioned that now you guys are on a break. I'm sure you would have had many moments in your career where it's not always at the forefront of your mind.
Yeah.
What has always kind of brought you, forgetting about this, we'll get into this bit now, but what has always kind of brought you back?
To Tripod?
Yeah.
Oh, it's usually just an interesting gig. It'll be, and that could be a kind of gig you've done 1,000 times before but haven't done for a while and would like to do again, like another comedy festival show, for example. There might be the case that, that just feels like a fun thing to do. Oh, play the Spiegel tent for a month. Yes, please. I love that place. Let's do it.
Nice.
Or it might be something like the video game, the Stray Gods or Assassin's Creed Syndicate or some crazy, Melbourne Symphony Orchestra might come along and want to do a show. How do you say no to that, right?
Yeah.
Or a soundtrack to a cartoon or whatever it might be, So it was usually that. It was usually the thing of like, oh, of course I'm going to do that gig. That's fun,
Nice. And from the motivation side, there would have been, naturally when you do anything, there's highs and lows.
Yeah.
Have you been able to kind of...
Oh, well, I mean, look, I'm not going to lie. It got pretty dysfunctional inside the Tripod bubble. I mean, it's three pretty unusual brains, or at least me and two unusual brains, in a very specific, quite heightened, kind of set of kind of parameters that, but by the end it was hard to know what was healthy and what wasn't, and so I think taking a break is definitely the healthy thing to do for us to get outside that bubble and kind of go, okay, so what are my actual skill sets and what is the actual world like right now? And what kind of furphies have been perpetuated by the culture inside the rehearsal room,
Do you think that with that new space and you're also doing other stuff and teaching, do you feel like there's a room for everyone to grow, learn about themselves and come back?
I'm not ruling anything out at this point. I mean, who knows what the future holds. There's a debate in the group about whether we should offer ourselves and the fans a bit of closure by doing some sort of, farewell thing or something. But that's, we don't see eye to eye on that inside the group. And so that's yet to be resolved. But who knows? I mean, I'm not there right now. I'm kind of enjoying, just the adventure of being free falling.
It's exciting because it's like when you're in a long-term relationship where sometimes you separate and you can learn so much about yourself, and who knows, maybe you go back, maybe you don't, but you get to enjoy being kind of you. It'd be very exciting and interesting.
Oh, for sure. It is. And look, it's a question of looking forward rather than looking back. At this point for me, looking forward is a really exciting proposition, and the Tripod thing feels like looking back, but who knows,
Last question on that. Prior to this, have you had moments where you thought you were done and then that's it?
No, there was always something. It's like right now is the most done moment chapter it's ever been. Okay. Yeah. Because there's always previously it was just like getting caught up in Dorothy's tornado and just getting taken off to Oz. It was almost out of your hands. All you could do was hold on for dear life, right? So you know, there was grumpiness and stomping around and being, I'm over this, but I never actually left.
Nice. Well, you can also see, I know I said this before, but the way that previously you've collaborated, how you've worked together, you know, sometimes putting the ego to the side. You don't do 30 plus years without, you know, having these type of conversations.
Oh, of course, yeah,
Huge success to you.
Big time.
And now you've also I'm not sure how many years this has been, but I don't even know how to describe what you do. I was telling you off air that this has been one of the most enjoyable to prepare for, but also one of the most complicated because you do so many different things like graphics, animation. How do you, like, what's your, like, 10-second elevator pitch when you tell people what you do? Because
I don't know. I struggle with that. Like, it depends on where I'm at. If I'm at the, say, Annecy Animation Festival, trying to get a show up, or, you know, sell my skills in the animation world as a writer or a designer or whatever, I'm a story guy. I storyboard and I write screenplay, right?
Yep.
Whereas, depending on whatever the content, if I'm at the Grammys, I'm a games composer because that's why I'm here, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, because what do you do? Like, it's
like less is more in that sense.
Yeah.
I do this to, I'm also part of.
If you start making a list, you can see people switching off halfway through, especially Americans, right? They
want to know, what are you? You're in a
clear.
box. This is Oh, you do comedy? You're never doing drama again. You played that character, you're never doing anything again.
Totally. And so, multidisciplinary creative, I think, is what my LinkedIn says, but that's a super boring way to put it.
No, I want to know more, but I'm maybe not wired like that. Oh, actually, last thing, did you ever consider moving to America?
The UK was beckoning at one point. We came back from a very successful Edinburgh season. I think it was the 07 one, maybe. And it had gone really well. So there was a lot of openings for the UK, and the conversation was, you know, if you're going to move there, now's the time, in 07. But even by then, we felt old and over it. And we also had families at that point. You know, I didn't have a kid yet, but there was wives and partners, and it's not as easy as one person going, I'm going to move to the States or follow my fortune, right? It would have been a whole village of people we had to convince to move, to follow us. Why is my career more important than my wife's? It's not, right? So, there was talk of that kind of thing, but I'm happy to live in Melbourne. It doesn't have necessarily the population to support a really super viable arts career, but it's also very livable, beautiful city.
Yes, I really like it here as well. Colin Lane actually talks about he had that decision to move. I think it was UK, and they decided not to, obviously. And, you know, he's like, sometimes like, should I have gone there, should I not? But he's still overall very happy for what he's been able to do.
Yeah, that's where I am at too. Nice. Sometimes you get into some what ifs, but
what ifs can be healthy and can also not be healthy, depending on how far we allow them to go. But I'm a big fan of the what if. Because you can, although you might not be able to move now, but what can you do now? How can you frame it? What can I,
It's that visualization stuff we were talking about before.
I love it. I've got a board where I try and map out everything. But a bit slack.
Nice.
Last thing before we do a rapid fire. So, you know, talking about illustrations, the graphics, the animation, the writing, how did you discover that? I know it's a multiple.
Well, that's what I was first. I mean, I was a passionate illustrator and writer, creative writer at high school. I applied to VCA as a writing to their writing program, as well as when I applied as a production person. So the tripod thing kind of was a detour from all of that stuff, if you know what I mean.
Interesting,
And I guess my overall, and I've always been into the way the different art forms kind of speak to each other, and I think it's I don't know, for me it's like this kind of, if you imagine a jellyfish, right? The top bit is common to all of it, right? Yep. And those are the important aesthetic decisions you're making. Why am I doing this? What am I trying to say? What works? What doesn't? How am I communicating with people? Who's going to be watching this? Those sorts of decisions are the same for every art form, right? But then it's just like the stringy bits of the jellyfish are the disconnected bits, and that's the motor skills involved in doing that art form. Those are different, right? Like playing a guitar is different to drawing a picture. Yep. But there's a reason that the same sorts of words crop up: pitch, tone, composition, rhythm. They appear in most all of the art forms, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a commonality to them all. Ultimately, it's the same thing you're trying to do.
I like how you're able to apply kind of the macro into these other things because you
Yeah.
could I mean this as a compliment to you.
Yeah.
A normal person would be like, they're completely different skill sets. I don't see how they relate.
Yeah.
But you're still trying to take the best of what you've kind of learned along the way.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, that's beautiful. You're an inspiration to me. We'll put the episode notes. We'll put a link to your website in the episode notes below. But you do, I think, a lot of like contracting work. People can.
Yeah, a lot of development work in animation. Like honestly, it's another tip of the iceberg. It's there's so many scripts and ideas and drawings and concepts and pictures that you will never see. Like 95% of the stuff is underneath the surface of the water, right?
Yeah.
So most of my work is development work, and I think that's a pretty common story.
Yeah, and you also do books.
I do. Yeah, I illustrate children's books. I don't have the patience to write books, but I do draw them, and I love them. And I create and pitch, animation and show ideas, and I write scripts, and I work for other people for their studios on stuff that for them might never see the light of day either. I'm doing a really fun one for a company overseas. It was like translating essentially kind of Hindi English, beautiful script.
Oh, is this the Indian one?
Yeah, it's kind of the work is written in a kind of a local patois over there, and so it's my job to kind of take it and rewrite all the dialogue and make it a little bit more kind of transatlantic. There are really fun little strange gigs like that that come along, right? I love that world, but it's hard to make a living out of.
Yes, I would imagine.
Yeah.
One of my goals is actually to create the new Banjo Kazooie.
Yeah.
To be kind of like the showrunner in that regard. Even though I have no skills whatsoever, but finding the right people to do everything and creating the worlds, and having a bit of music. That genuinely, even though the screenwriting's I think I'd be most proud if I could bring it back and do all the stuff that you're talking about. It sounds amazing.
Now's the time.
Yes.
That's the time. With Sonic the Hedgehog in his ascendancy, Banjo can't be far.
Yes, we're putting. If you're listening, we'll work together. I need this. This is the most important thing to me. You also mentioned, but we can talk about it another time. But you spoke about the Indian development and how it's very interesting and how people have reached out to you. Is that in the same regard? Anything else?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just talk about the theme of failure. Like you go to these conventions. Kids Screen is one I went to in Miami last year, and there's these festivals and so forth. And you go, and when you first start going, you're like, firstly you think, oh, maybe I'll get a gig, right? Like maybe I'll get a job out of this, right? And you go and you feel like such a schmuck, and it's the same thing like I was talking about with Edinburgh. What am I doing here? I'm on the other side of the world. I haven't met anyone. This is stupid. And then in the example of Kids Screen, I get drunk with a bunch of randos on Miami Beach on the last night. We have an absolute blast. It's got nothing to do with work.
Yeah.
I go home, and then a year and a half later, one of them reaches out to me. It's like, the studio I own are doing this thing, and we'd like you to write the dialogue for it. It's like, so what seems like a failure short term can sometimes it's a matter of patience,
But also, that's brilliant. It's also just about enjoying life as well.
Yes.
It doesn't need to be the hustle and the networking. Yes, that's important to various degrees, but you were just kind of present and being in life.
It's the relationships. You're a person, and also all those other people also happen to be people,
That is such a good story. Okay, we'll do a rapid fire segment to wrap up. I'm not going to comment on them because I'll derail them.
Okay, all right.
And take your time, and I'm just going to fix this. Okay, ready to rumble?
Sure am.
I've been saying this, but I want to hear it in your words.
Yeah.
What's been your special ingredient to work all these years?
A desire to learn, I'm going to say. Yeah.
What brings the best creative content out of you?
Playfulness.
What keeps you motivated?
Fear.
Can you expand?
If I fail, I don't want it to be because I didn't try.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually one of the questions. What would you do if you knew you cannot fail?
If I knew I couldn't fail, firstly, I'd be a complete douchebag. If I knew I couldn't fail, I'd take this pitch out again that I've been working on for so long that I love that no one else can quite see. It needs making. It's really good.
Do you want to give a snapshot and
No.
maybe one day? Okay. What are you most proud of?
As talked about before, having put a roof over my head as an artist in Melbourne for as long as I did.
What who do you get most mistaken for? Maybe when you were doing tripod, did people ever think you were someone else?
Yeah, always. I love you guys. I got this yesterday. I love the Scared Weird Little guys.
What do you say? Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I say tripod and they apologise, and I say no need to apologise. It happens all the time, you know.
That's hilarious. What's your next big dream or goal?
Next big dream or goal, so I'm studying to be a teacher, so I want to finish that degree. Yep. You know, I would be really proud of myself if I could do that.
Nice.
Yeah.
When you can do that, not if.
Thank you.
Last two. Any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
Well, I guess my advice is, you know, as I say, you'd rather fail at doing that than wondering if you could have done it, you know. So be brave. You could be surprised.
Very good. Yeah. We're going to plug that everywhere.
Yeah.
Last question before I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you. What is the one question I should have asked you?
The one question you should have asked me is what my Dungeons and Dragons character is.
Oh, yes,
very disappointed we didn't get into that topic.
Oh, I hear about this. So what's the...
that's just a tattooed dice on my arm there. Yeah, that's been a huge part of my life, the creativity and kind of collaborative storytelling of D&D. It's been a good training ground.
I don't know if you know this gentleman. He's in America. Todd Stashwick. He was in Star Trek, the latest one. He played the captain. Yeah. And he is like bringing the community back.
Yeah.
He does like live streams with like some well-known people, some not. He sells a bunch of stuff. Yeah. I never knew what it was, but the way that he talks about it, as I said, if someone's passionate, I used to think it was for like nerds and you didn't have any. I was completely wrong.
It was for nerds. You weren't wrong.
No, the nerds maybe, but the communities that I've seen and the joy, and you're smiling about it as well.
I love it. And as an impro guy, you would love it too, because there's a lot of impro storytelling involved. It's in the very fabric of the game, you know. It's like built around that.
It actually sounds amazing. This was my own ridiculous beliefs of not knowing anything. Yeah. And
so we could do another 2 hours on this. We better be careful.
Oh, okay. So it's something you do regularly?
Yeah, still to this day with friends that I've been playing with for 30 years. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I love it. And you make these stories together that span decades.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll talk about this another time. Before we go, how can people follow you and keep up to date with you?
Yeah, so I sometimes post on Instagram. Skodman is fine. Skod, SCOD for dog, MAN. Skodman is fine. And then, Scott Edgar Creative, if you want to come and see a little... .com. If you want to come and see a little sort of overview of the various random schemes and heists I've been involved in.
Yes, we'll put it all in the episode notes below. Thank you so much. I love your mindset. You're very empowering, and the thirst for knowledge is contagious. So thank you so much.
Good on you. Thank you.
I love how part of Scott's story was around simply putting his hand up for a potential opportunity. It is crazy to think that if Scott never put his hand up for the comedy festival, he may have never have done comedy. I love this because although it can be scary to take advantage of the opening, Scott realized that despite all that could potentially go wrong, i.e. how comedy wasn't a focal point of their act, he knew deep within his heart he had to pursue it. This sliding door moment really spoke to me because often we pray for a miracle but are too scared to make the first step. The opportunity presented itself. Scott knew that he and the team could rise to the challenge, and the rest is history. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. Take advantage of every opportunity. Where there is none, make it for yourself. Marcus Garvey. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.